Hello, everyone. I can see a few people filing in to the webinar now. We're just going to leave it a couple of minutes and then we will kick off the session. But while you're joining, I would love for you to let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And then I've also got a poll, which I'll throw up just to help guide the conversation this afternoon. Yeah, we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. For those of you that have just joined, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We're just going to give it 2 more minutes, but while you're joining, we would love for you to do the poll and then also let us know in the chat box where you're tuning in from. Got a pretty good spread across the poll. Looks like effective grazing management is leading the race at the moment. Got people tuning in from Inverell, down in Victoria, down in Yass, Condobolin. Armidale. All right, I might close out the poll and we will get started. I'll share the results with you so you can have a quick look for those who are interested. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. For those who haven't seen me on a webinar before, lucky you. My name is Amber and I'm the marketing manager for Australia. Been on the team for about 5 years now. I live up in northwestern New South Wales, just outside of a town called Rowena. And yeah, I'm really happy that you've all chosen to spend your lunch times with us today, talking about the biggest productivity drivers on a livestock operation. We are really lucky today to be joined by Mark and Carly. We were also meant to have two other guests joining us on our panel, but they couldn't make it, unfortunately. Both of them are having a lot of trouble at the moment with the really dry conditions. One was from South Queensland, who's missed out on rain since January, and the other guest was from down at Mortlake in Victoria, who are obviously having a really challenging time with the dry season at the moment. So it's really nice to see a few people tuning in from Victoria and South Australia, and we are sending our thoughts to you guys for this really challenging season that I know you're facing. I just wanted to quickly introduce Mark. So Mark Morton is going to lead our session today. We're very lucky to have Mark joining us. He's an experienced industry commentator and a really key part of our large web of AgriWebb advisors. We work closely with Mark on a weekly basis just to make sure that we're keeping our finger on the pulse. And of course, I try and drag Mark onto as many webinars as I can. Mark is tuning in from Armidale. He's actually had to do the dash into town this morning because Essential Energy very kindly turned off his power at about 9 o'clock this morning. So he's making the most of Armidale's tech hub. But no, we're very lucky to have you on, Mark. So thank you for joining.
Thanks, Amber. Good afternoon. Confirming, Amber, is it coming across clear?
Loud and clear. Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you. So, look, thanks for such a broad topic and license to go anywhere. To get the conversation rolling, I think it's quite, I can make the statement, an obvious statement, but I think our livestock industries are characterised by two things. One, climate volatility, and market volatility, and we've seen that market volatility play out recently thanks to the US tariffs. Change the conversation, creates opportunities. We're quite fearful of it. That's changed, and then I can summarise. If I summarised it by Simon Quilty last week at the Angus Forum, calling Angus steers to 750 cents a kilo by October next year. Which, how do we play that game? And to your point, Amber, talking to climate volatility, recognising that those south of Dubbo have a particularly challenging set of circumstances. And I recall an advice from Terry McCosker many years ago talking about drought. He said, we're all in it. We're either getting ready for it, doing it, or working out how to come out of it. So wherever we are, that conversation around drought is always at the front of our mind. So I'm joined today from Central Queensland, Carly, and when I looked at her little bit of research and extensive operation based in Central Queensland, diverse geography, and so I'm managing across 3 properties, 5,500 head. And what struck me is that that's probably a capital commitment of anywhere between 6 and 9 million. And Carly, with that CV, I'd say you'd be well equipped to manage a top 300 listed entity. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. I don't know about that, to be honest, but anyway.
Carly, look, quite an impressive and considered operation, as well as being an AgriWebb customer for quite some time. But if I asked you today to kick the conversation away, if I asked you at 3 o'clock in the morning, what keeps you awake?
Right into it. Well, obviously there's peaks and troughs with what keeps me awake. But when thinking about this question, I suppose the 2 things that come to mind are, the first is basically, have we done enough to ready ourselves for the next dry year, for our, I suppose it would be our next 2019, or a similar situation to that, where there was large sections of the country were experiencing this sort of dry, and so commodities were really hard to come by, and so I suppose that's probably the main thing that I think about often, is how are we going to handle that situation. And my husband's from southern New South Wales, so we have family down there, and it's a reminder to all that it's just around the next corner. But I suppose, have I done enough? Are we doing enough? Have we got a plan that is going to ensure that we get through that sort of situation again? And I suppose the other thing that I think about often is, I do think of our business as an investment business, and I am often thinking, are we making the most of the investment opportunities at our fingertips at the moment? I would say, from where we sit, the market's a little bit depressed. Interest rates are a little bit higher than most people, than some people have an appetite for. It's sort of like a buyer's market, both in the livestock sector and in the rural asset sector. And so we've been, constantly trying to reassess and say, are we making the most? Can we do something at times like this? Because I know sure as eggs, when, if Simon Quilty's predictions run true, it just goes crazy up here, certainly in Queensland, with, as soon as the cattle market increases, the livestock, the property market just goes bananas, and that's when it becomes more challenging to sort of operate. So I suppose they're the two things that I think about often.
So I'm summarising here what we said to wake up. Have we planned adequately? But significantly, have we taken the opportunities that's presented to us?
Yep, that's right.
So to take that further, and AgriWebb's titled this webinar productivity outcomes, and I dare say that productivity outcomes, we're looking for that productivity drive, would be a significant part of you and your husband conversations.
Yep.
So if I threw that question at you and said, it's a generic term, productivity, what does that mean to you guys?
I suppose productivity, to me, either speaks about making more money, being more profitable because you've either increased your turnoff or you've decreased your costs, which is becoming, basically impossible. So it's either about increasing the profitability, or to me, increasing productivity is also becoming a more drought resilient, I suppose, business, a more sustainable, perhaps sustainable, I suppose, in the longer term, but I mean sort of more resilient. So so if I can keep the business rolling through those, if we're equipped to handle those tougher times better, then I would say that, to me, that's an increase in productivity. And while you're not seeing it year on year, it certainly bloody helps. Yep.
What's interesting, Carly, is that you were trying really hard to stay away from that sustainable word.
Oh, yeah. Well, look. You know what? We just do our best. We do our very best at home, and I have no doubt that everyone on this call is the same. We we try to keep good crowd. We try to keep really good ground cover. We try and do the best we can by the land, and all the time. And yet, I suppose the goalposts of sustainability are really sort of, they're just so airy-fairy. It's hard to, I haven't sort of found a niche in that word that I go, that's us, or, and then, like everyone just shifts the goalpost anyway. I mean, if for us in Queensland, we've got a huge issue around buffel grass and them wanting to put it on the as a registered pest and weed, and it covers, oh my God, like huge tracts of land in Queensland. And it was introduced way back when the government was pushing those people on those carve out blocks to be more productive. And I just go, that's I don't know, you don't know sometimes what more we can do.
Carlo, it sets up the conversation really, because on one hand we talk about volatility with climate, with markets, with people, with government. On the other hand, the desire is to create, if I use the term, a consistent and resilient business that copes with those challenges, but also to take the opportunities. Can I pull that through in another sense? Part of the tools to build that resilient business and some of the innovations that you've taken on in more recent times.
Yep.
So I was to ask you for what's been your dominant or most significant investment or change in what you do, what would that be?
I suppose if I think about infrastructure and I think about the really significant things that, well, I think they haven't cost a lot, but if I think about those infrastructure things, I'd probably say our top two are buying an Optiway, which is an in-paddock weigher. And then the second thing that we have done is probably running individual management AgriWebb system. and I know that sounds quite crafted, but it is actually deadly true. Like it allows me to I've got much better control over the business, to be honest. Because I know what's actually going on. I use AgriWebb. We use a true test system in the yards. All the staff, everyone sends me CSVs of all the stuff they do when they're in the yards. I run the system myself, and then I feed it into we also feed in our OptiWay results into that, and then I basically, whenever I work on AgriWebb, mostly I work also with Figured. So so the data just flows from there to there to there, and then the Figured allows me to then keep my budgets live and really accurate, because I've got the numbers really well. They're not really accurate, but they're getting really accurate.
Carla, you've actually hit another point that we didn't talk about this, but I'm also a bit of a figure junkie.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Mhm.
yeah, I'm one of these individuals that like going to the figured conference in New Zealand.
Great.
But the point being, you're embracing the use we've talked about AgriWeb and the host today, but I've heard you actually pick up what is the technology that creates value. So the IAM conversation is
Mhm.
it's an evolving one. So tell me, if I asked you, tell me about your ideal animal and how you use the IAM process to drive that.
Right. Well, we've got Wagyu. So if I'm talking about a steer, obviously he would be, so I'm looking for an animal that would have to be on the first truck to the feedlot. So he's obviously had a average daily gain that's on the top of the list, that's got him on the first truck and not in the third or fourth truck. And then he feeds like a champion, and he dresses out. He's got a good carcass weight, about 420 to 430 to 440, and also he's got a marble score 9. So that's about all we're looking for. We're not much in a steer. And then, yeah, like a heifer, she needs to breed early, milk well, which isn't always easy with wags, and then reconceive, within the year. I mean, birth to reconceiving within the 65 days postpartum or whatever it is. And yeah, and then, but also for us, she has to survive where we live. She has to be adaptable and tough, and and enjoy the heat, which mostly they do. And so they're the sort of qualities we look for.
Carla, the IAM conversation is an
Mm.
interesting one. And if I said that if we were farming, grain growing, that technology is embedded within tractors, headers, pickers,
Mm.
sprayers, etc. So that becomes an embedded process. In the livestock industry, I think our people challenge is a lot greater within an IAM process because we're introducing a process that requires another labour unit, requires another skilled unit, requires a jackaroo or a station hand to operate technology, crush side.
Mm.
Don't want much. How do you do it?
Well, so we started in at beef, not last beef, the beef before, whatever that was, 21 maybe, is when we bought the IM package. And it's taken us a long time to sort of get it going, but it is worth every drop of heartache and time that we've invested in it. But through trial and error, we now like I said before, is everyone just does a CSV file for me on their True Test or their Gallagher, and then I've got access to them online, and then I basically upload all the data and the details of what they're doing myself, and then what I do is I send the completed files back to them, and they just apply the treatments, because I don't want to run an inventory. I don't want to run the inventory because we've got 3 places. It's not a shared inventory, so they apply treatments. That's their sort of role with AgriWebb, and that works well. That works well for us. It's just a lot. It's a lot for it's not like when our staff get to the yards, they've got like a wing of people. It's really just it's them, it's themselves, like 2 people at best, and it's just we found it was too much to be, they're trying to achieve this outcome in a day of getting the cattle processed and whatever, and you add an extra layer of AgriWebb and a live session and stuff, and it's hard. And look, I know even with my husband breathing down my neck at the yards, like he's ready to get going, and I just have to, ignore him and get the tech set up. But then if you think about those qualities you asked me for about in my ideal cattle, I've got no way of measuring that if I don't do individual management. Like, I've got no way of how do I find those animals that are the good ones, and how do I keep breeding those animals that are the good ones and stuff like that. So that's what that enables us to do. It enables us to assess the on-farm data and all the their whole of life on farm. And I just think it's going to, I hope to get to the point where I can, cull females based on, maybe pull out the bottom third based on the weaner that they create. Obviously, milk's an issue for us, and so I'd love to get to that point where we're just not having that. We have a real tail in our weaners, and if I can use AgriWebb to sort of pull out the females that are having those calves, then that's going to be huge for us, because they're a big cost to the business.
So, Carla, to what I've heard you say is that the IAM process is it's hard, it's tough, but it's valuable.
Yep.
The second part of that is in building the team to take that process on, is it being very clear on the instructions and the resources and the capability you give the staff in the yard, so that they know what they've got to collect when, and just do that. But then your own skill set is probably advanced. I use the term quite cheekily, you could run a top 300, but these are the type of skills that you as a business owner are probably invested in to take that level. Which leads me to a sort of bit of a wrap-up comment, and strategically, we've talked about productivity leads to profitability. The one conversation I think we're talking more around and debating, and it's quite an expanded one, is risk. So how does that risk conversation fit within you and your husband's business there?
I think risk, people's appetite for risk is really different. And we started, when we bought the family farm, it had a level, when we bought into, from my father, it had a level of debt that attached to it from the start. And we have, that amount has grown, and we've grown the business, but that debt level has grown significantly. And I think so I guess what I'm saying is I get used to that feeling, that high risk sort of situation. And I suppose when I think about it, I break it down into, like, there's those big ticket items that are just, going to bugger us, like foot and mouth disease, probably interest rates at 18%. Those two things probably would unravel us really fast. But then I think, I don't know, is that a reason to not do it, to not do something? And it's not. It's for us. But then there's everything in between. Then there's the real, probably the more real risks, you know, dry seasons, increased interest rates, that sort of thing, market volatility, and things like that. So I suppose, yeah, over time, I sort of get used to that niggling stomach ache that goes on the whole time. But I also, you know, there's a saying that says, you know, without great risk, there's no reward, or there, you know, whichever. And I sort of try and, you know, think of it like that a little bit, because the rural sector, oh my God, like it's all risk. Every day there's risk. There's staff at risk. There's risk everywhere. So I think everyone does pretty well to manage, you know, just every day.
Carly, you make a very strong point around risk return, and I do recall the godfather or the grandfather of risk in Australian agriculture, Professor Bill Malcolm from the University of Melbourne. And I remember sitting in a session he gave one day that sort of set me back on the heels a bit, but he made that very, very same point. He said, if you're not prepared to accept risk in agriculture, please don't expect to make any money.
Yeah, yep.
But what I've actually, your investment in, we talk technology, but also in your own capability to understand and take these risks on. And if I made the comment to you, the better you understand risk, the more likelihood and capable are to take opportunities. Would you challenge that view?
No, I wouldn't. I think you're right. Like, I think understanding is sort of, understanding is everything. And like, you know, like if you're planning a purchase, say, and you go, well, yeah, like that thing could happen, you know, that would be bad. But it's sort of like, you've covered all your bases, you know that, and then you have to say, righto, well, I'm prepared to take this risk. Yes, A, B, C may happen, but B, you know, D, C, E, and F might also happen, and, you know, will be sweet. But yeah, I think if you've got the data behind you, like all the financial and the reconciliation, and you can really prove, it's just about, you know, yes, budgets change, but you basically know how you're going to fare in good times and bad. And I think it allows you to step outside and go, we'll be right. And I know also, you know, Peter Hughes once said, and he wrote this quote. He did an article in the Australian magazine one year. Oh, it was years ago when we were just starting out, and it said that, and I cut it out of his article, and it said that the rural industry is full of lazy assets, and basically that you need to go out and get your place accurately valued and use it from there. And like, that's not for everyone, but it's just sort of how we have tried to get through patches where, you know, we've had to really extend ourselves and live with that level of risk.
Carl, I've got a final question before we take questions from the audience. And I think you talk about use of technology. We've mentioned Figure, we've talked about OptiWay, the IAM process with AgriWebb, the operating platform. If I ask you this, with the use of that technology, what question have you been able to ask yourselves that if you hadn't used that technology, you wouldn't have been able to make before? If I can expand that a little bit,
Yep.
I think in using technology, we think we're looking for solutions, and I don't think that's the case. What it sets us up to do is to ask questions that we've not been able to ask before. So if I threw that question directly to you guys, how would you question
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Well, I suppose, like if I think about what I was doing this morning, I was sifting through AgriWebb. I'm trying to get a decent handle on what our country can do, what our cattle do on our country, you know, as far as an average daily gain goes across a year or in whole of life. And that might probably, there's heaps of people all over that. But for me, AgriWebb, keeping it in one spot in an organised fashion, in a way that it looks good, because I'm like, that person that, with pictures and the colours, it's all, it's so much easier to use. If I'd had a pile of Excel files, I'd probably never get to it. But so I look at all that, and I can assess what the cattle on the Lakina are doing, what the crossbred, heifers are doing that we've got left, then versus the F3s or the purebreds. And I suppose, yeah. And then I'm always going, is this the best use of our land? Like this is what these animals are doing. Can we do this better somewhere else? Can we do it? What can we do differently to get a better result? But if I hadn't used my OptiWay and used that data like that, it would just be all floating around in the never never.
I have to make a confession with OptiWise. It's a new one way, so I can sit on the Opti app. So hang on,
Yeah.
rather than social media, I can see. Yeah, what's that? Carly, what we might do is that we've got one question, and I'm going to leave that one out if I could, and then we invite from our audience, please, more questions. It's really been insightful the last half hour. So, question for you, Carly. From your experience, what do you think would help encourage other farmers,
Yep.
especially those hesitant to try new technology, to feel more confident about adopting ag tech or new tools? So I guess if I was to summarise that question, how would you overcome one of those barriers, those resistance point, and to build confidence?
Yep. I think that the best way is to have people on the ground, having days where people can come to maybe sit down or see it used in the yards, talk to other producers. I know when we were implementing the stuff, all they really wanted to learn how to do it, probably from someone other than me. That was a big thing. To actually have spots on the ground, I think is the most important thing, because people will go to someone else's property not only to look at the AgriWebb, but have a good sticky beak, and that's how you get feet on the ground, I think, anyway.
I think if I was to add to that, what I've heard you say today is about really clear about your expectations. So I think the easy point is that this is what I want to do. This is clear on what I'm trying to achieve. This is what's going to drive my business. This is going to help me to understand the risk, my own risk, and those risk components, and then be prepared to make mistakes, and
Yep.
then debrief those mistakes. So if I was to offer that observation.
But I would add that also the difficulty is that like the guys in the yards, they haven't got the needs that I have. Like I've got needs from the bank and from what I want to achieve with our cattle and stuff like that. And it is difficult to get that buy-in, and it takes time. It takes time to get buy-in. And look, because we're just we've got no HR skills, my husband and I. And so it's just you just whittle away at it, you know, bit by bit, and eventually they start to see the end product, and maybe a few things that float their way because it, you know, it's going well, or I don't know. But yeah, it does take a bit of time, and you got to remember that their headspace is a completely different shop to what mine is.
So to that, Carl, if I asked you another question, you said, how do you define success, and how would you communicate that success to the rest of your team?
Look, for us, it would be to run a certain number of cattle that I need to, you know, stay afloat, to create a good quality one, because they run breeder blocks. So to create a good quality breeder block, and to be trying to improve the land by controlling weeds or improving pastures. And then also success for me, but it's a bit more difficult, is you know, is so that they're happy too, and trying to achieve that is more challenging. But that's what I would love, is I would love everyone to be happy, because it does feedback, and it directly relates to their productivity and their output. And, you know, they're in control of a really, really large asset. And yeah, while it's difficult, that's what I would hope. I don't know if I'm not saying that they're happy, but I would love that if they were happy and we were getting what we wanted as well.
I've just had another question, which I'm trying which I'll just pick up, and it's of a similar vein. So do you feel that there's a conflict between the need to drive both profitability and productivity, and then that challenges potentially lifestyle, stress, that human component, and perhaps the environment? Is there a conflict between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I don't think, I think environmentally, we can certainly manage it. There has to be a line in the sand where you have to stop and say, that's enough. We have to pull out now, and save the pastures, or save the land, or you know, you have to think ahead. You have to have your eyes on, you know, how we're going to recover from this drought or whatever. There's definitely a line in the sand there. But I think on a personal level, you know, with lifestyle, yeah, it's not a balance. And I suppose I've just got to the point now where I'm pretty much know that it's not a balance. It's not a balance. And we get joy from what we do in our jobs, and it is basically it consumes us. And yeah, we have no balance, but I don't know how. We're okay with that, I think.
Carly, I'm actually going to suggest we wrap that. It's been a tremendous 40 minutes, and to me, it's posed more questions, and the candour of which you've answered these has been, I thank you for it. So if I was to summarise our conversation this afternoon, the goal to build a profitable, resilient, consistent business that is thinking not today, but next year, 3 years, 5 years out, is an enormous challenge. But it's a challenge that you and your husband and your team are taking on.
Yep.
In defining that risk, you're accepting and embracing, guess what, we're taking risk on. You've mentioned that you've a close relationship with a bank, you know, it's a tight relationship. Yeah, but at the same point, as much as I can make a facetious comment, they've been instrumental in your growth.
Yep.
That the use of technology in the broader sense has been a critical tool to help manage and drive both productivity, but actually embracing and taking on risk.
Yep, definitely.
To drive those decisions, I think when I kicked off, that they said, a livestock inventory between 6 and 9 million. That with livestock, they've got the habit of living. They've also got the habit of dying, as you mentioned, which is something to take on. It's not easy. That it involves building the capacity of people, yourselves, your team, and there's some. It's not utopia, but it's challenging, but it's rewarding.
Yep.
But instrumental that is actually building the capacity of yourselves through managing what you do, leading your farming business, and it's been a real privilege this afternoon. So many thanks.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. And Amber, thank you.
Amber, I might revert it back to you if you're good to take it back.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for both of you. Very well led, Mark and Carly. Thank you so much for your honest and candid. Mark said, we really appreciate your perspective, and thank you for being a one-woman panel this afternoon. We appreciate it. I just wanted to call out for those that are still on the call. I know you're probably all rushing back to work now, but Carly did mention that one of the best ways to think about when you're in the process of thinking about adopting ag tech is to attend a producer group or chat to someone that you know who's using the product. Our support team are always available for that call. If you would like to get face-to-face, though, we do have a number of producer groups coming up. If you would like us to host a producer group in your area, we would love to get out on the road. We love nothing more than getting face-to-face with you guys. We're actually heading up to see Carly in a couple of weeks' time at the carcass competition, and having a producer group up there as well. And then we will be on the road at the end of July and early August for the Great Australian Charity Cattle Drive as well. So we'll be around Mitchell and finishing up at Roma as well. So if you would like to see us, we will be in southern Queensland, and we do have a number of producer groups happening through. We have one in Armidale, we've got a couple happening down in Victoria, and potentially even Tassie as well. So we're on the road, and we would love to get in front of you guys. So yes, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Carly and Mark, and we hope to see you all on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Too easy.